user group dedicated to the PHP programming language and to web development in general. We meet up once a month, usually on the second Wednesday of the month. In a minute, I will be joined by tonight's speaker. His name is Peter Fox, and he is a... Can somebody open the door for this gentleman over there, please? Thank you. His name is Peter Fox, and he's a senior software engineer at Amicus. And it's actually the second time that Peter speaks at PHP Sussex, because he came to Brighton last year, in March, I believe, to give a talk about feature flags. And tonight, Peter is going to show us a way out of Dependency Hell. So using tools like Composer, PHPStan, and Rector to essentially make sure that we always have up-to-date dependencies in our projects, which is sometimes trickier than it sounds. Before we do this, though, first, a reminder that this event is being recorded. So if you do not want to be filmed or photographed, please do let us know. And then before we get started, Charlie is going to tell us a few words about Runway East and Silicon Brighton, who kindly support this meetup tonight.
I'm indeed. Thank you very much, Yannick, my friend. Yes, for those of you who I've not had the pleasure to meet before, I'm Charlie. I work in events and community engagement for Silicon Brighton. And first of all, I just want to give a big shout out and some huge thanks to Runway East, who are not only hosting us in this fantastic venue this evening, but have also covered the cost of the pizza that we've been enjoying tonight. So thank you very much to them. We love them very much for hosting us for all of the events that we get to run here. And yeah, as I say, I work for this fantastic company called Silicon Brighton. We're the hosts of Brighton & Hove's tech sector, and we support over 30 different meetup groups across the city, including PHP Sussex that you can see there as well. All the events that we run are free to join, available to people at all different ability levels and hybrid. So you're obviously in the room here with us, but we also run a live stream. Hello to everybody who's watching us on YouTube. And none of the work that we do would be possible without the help of our amazing supporters, who you can see here. If there's a company who you know, who might be interested in supporting us, who you can't see on this list, please point them in our direction. We'd really appreciate it. And I'd like to give a special thanks as well to Octopus Energy, James Chase, Hyperion Dev, and the University of Sussex Business School, who are our sponsors and play a really key pivotal role in enabling us to do all the fantastic work that we do. And none of what we do would be possible without a small army of helpers like meetup organizers and volunteers whom we owe a massive debt of gratitude to. And if you'd be up for helping out or getting involved, then please do come and speak to myself after the event this evening. We're looking for people to speak at events, people to sponsor events, people to help organize the groups and to volunteer as well. And like I say, potential supporters and subscribers as well. These are our core values that I'll just let you read through now. But whilst you're reading, I just want to raise that if you feel these aren't being upheld at any point, please let me know immediately and I will jump right on it. All the work that we do, you can see on our socials, which is at Silicon Brighton for Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter /X, and TikTok. And you can see a list of the upcoming events that we've got here. Tomorrow we are at Projects for Product Unleashed, which is like a product UX meetup. Then next week we're back with the second event then of a new group called Breaking Breadboards, which is it's absolutely awesome. It's like a hardware meetup. So the guys who run it bring in a load of like homemade robots and stuff that they've made. It's absolutely brilliant. It completely blows my mind, to be honest with you. And then Brighton Pie is next week as well, along with People Planet Pint and JavaScript Brighton. So if you're feeling absolutely mad on Thursday, the 18th of July, you can do 3 events in one night. And as everyone knows, Pride is here in Brighton at the beginning of August. And we are marching in the parade on Saturday morning. And if you would like to join us in the parade, we would love to have you. And you can sign up through, I believe that there is a an event page on the PHP meetup? Not yet, but there will be. Amazing. So you can sign up through there if you would like to join us, and please do. It's going to be an amazing day. Please also join our Slack community if you haven't done so already, and scan this QR code, which will take you to our link tree where you can follow up with everything that I've gone through there, all the events, the Slack page, and everything else as well. So that's everything from me. I want to say a massive thank you. Enjoy the event, and I'll see you on the other side. Let's see if we can get out of dependency hell.
Thank you, Charlie. Do you have a microphone? You're going to need a microphone. Is there another microphone for Peter? I'm not sharing my microphone. I'm going to do that here. 1 2 1 2 1 2.
Testing. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Yannick. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Yeah, thanks for being with us again. It's really great to have you here once more.
Yeah, it's lovely to be here as well.
It's really our pleasure. We've actually met up recently because we both went to Laravel Live UK last month in London. And before that, like in February, we bumped into each other at PHP UK, so another conference in London as well. And a year before that, we also met up at PHP UK, the 2023 edition. So we clearly enjoy going to these events, to these conferences. And I did want to ask you about that actually. So what's kind of like your overall opinion on conferences? Like what do you get out of them? Why do you think that that maybe they are important, or at least important enough for you or for your company to spend 200 quid or whatever it is to send you there? So what's your overall opinion on conferences, and why do you like them?
It's a good question. I think it's a part of it is depending on different conferences. Community is really good. I think Laravel one, there's something slightly special about the community there. Yeah. Everyone seems to be really into sharing those ideas. You still get the same at the PHP UK. It's a little bit different because obviously everyone's in their slightly own different niches. Sure. I think there's also just sometimes just getting to sit through someone's talk, and it might be in something really different to what you ever do in your day-to-day job, but it's then kind of that exciting idea of something new, something different. Admittedly, sometimes you can end up with like several talks that are slightly the same every year, but learning to do PHP extensions is something that I always thought would be interesting to do. Yeah. I've not really put it to use yet, but there's always ideas floating around in my head. Was
that at PHP UK, I think, right? There was the
last
workshop,
Yes, last time we had a workshop, but even I think the years past, they've had some other talks. Yeah. And, that gives you some ideas of, well, maybe with like AI, you might be able to plug in that into PHP quite quickly if you know that knowledge. Yeah. But sometimes it's very hard to break into those new ideas without actually just sitting there, spending the time and focusing on what they're actually telling you.
It's true. Yeah. I guess in a way, it's a good, you're a captive audience, but in a good way. Like it really forces you to actually pay attention and actually learn something.
I think everyone tries to like watch a YouTube video and take it in, but the truth is we've got so many distractions in our lives, and actually having that solid time to sit down for an hour, listen to someone talk about what can be quite dry subjects. True. There's something more about being in that atmosphere, being in the room, and actually being able to really take it in. And equally getting to, if you don't want to ask questions, because that can be quite intimidating after a talk, there's that opportunity still to, catch that speaker at the end of the day and have a drink and actually talk their ideas, maybe throw something back and forth, get their opinion on the situation you're in at the moment, if it relates to what they were talking about.
That's true, and everybody's always really easy to talk to. Like they're very available, accessible, and they're very nice about it. So that's pretty cool. It's interesting because we talked about it before, and so when you go as like an employee of Amicus, right? And you go with some coworkers as well sometimes. Like I met a couple last time. And when I go as a freelance developer, right? And actually, I also go as the organizer of PHP Sussex. And like you, so I really enjoy the talks. Quite often I leave these conferences with, with a few new ideas in my pocket, so to speak. But it's also great to find new speakers for PHP Sussex, and also to find new members, actually. That's pretty good for that as well. Yeah, I would say at this stage, I really enjoy the talks as well. I think maybe the networking is even more important to me now and more enjoyable as well.
Yeah, it's something I think I'm getting into more, because I remember the first kind of conferences I went to was very much focus of I'm just going to sit here and do the talks, grab some lunch, and then not be too focused. But you start to go enough, you see those same kind of faces. It actually does become very much more community focused, and having that fun of seeing what that person's been up to. So
definitely, that sounds good. Have you done a Git bisect since Laravel Live UK?
No, I can't say I have
you haven't
put that to use yet.
That's fair enough. The reason I'm asking is because there was a talk about Git bisect at Laravel Live, and I'm not going to explain what Git bisect is, but it's basically like one of those less known features of Git, which actually can be very useful in some instances. And we kind of like talked about that, the fact that we might try to use it after the conference, but I haven't got around to using it either.
No, definitely not.
All right, thank you for your insights, but I'm going to let you get on with your talk now. So without any further ado, please welcome Peter for his talk, Escaping Dependency Hell.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll get started with just a quick introduction. Obviously, I'm Peter Fox. Bit of poorly done Photoshop there. So my background is professional PHP developer of 15 years or so. As mentioned by Yannick, I'm employed by Amicus. It's actually where I learned a lot of the skills I'm talking about today and kind of piece them together. I'm also a maintainer of a couple of PHP packages, mainly related to Laravel. Because we've kind of mentioned Rector, and I'll be talking about it later, I'm also a maintainer for Laravel Rector, and also been a contributor to the actual main PHP Rector repository. Start with a quick definition. What actually is dependency hell? As we've kind of got here, it's this situation where your dependencies start to become a problem effectively. Most of it really comes out of this idea of technical debt. And the problem is often it's a case of you're getting further and further down the road of where your major versions are now starting to become several behind. Stole this from ChatGPT. There isn't really a very good definition for dependency hell, sadly. Why are the upgrades actually so hard? So the first one really is about major versions. Anytime you've got a major version upgrade, it's probably going to come with some breaking issues as well in your code base. Another thing I found is more that when you're working in a kind of busy environment, you don't really even get the time for minor version upgrades. We kind of just leave it and then go, oh, we'll do a major upgrade instead. Features just often take priority as well. In most companies, it's very difficult to justify, like, why do we need to do this thing? And once it comes down to it, it's like, how do we sell the value of that until it's already a problem? You can't hire new people because they don't want to work on an old system, or, the developers themselves are like, well, we can't do that feature because it's not compatible. How we were struggling at Amicus is essentially started really with this problem of we left things probably too late. We generally will keep everything within the window of it's still going to get security fixes, but often we felt the pressure of actually we've only got a couple months left to get this done. A second thing was very much a case of we tried to jump major versions. So it might be a case of we were working on PHP 7.3 and we wanted to get it up to 8.1 because that was what was the latest available. So we started doing these really big jumps. Equally, we're trying to do it all in one go with things like changing our framework from Laravel 6 to 9 in one go. Maybe we'd even throw in like a server upgrade, so like doing a MySQL upgrade as well, just to make it even more of a nightmare. Equally, it's very hard to convince a company to stop adding features at the same time you're doing such major upgrades. You know, you're told by the business, oh, you've only got so many months to get this done. That makes it really difficult when you're trying to do all those things in one go. And then on top of that, you've now got this kind of branch where all of the upgrades are, but people are now making new code, and that has to be merged into your upgrade branch. Chances are that merge is so difficult that they've broken those features in the meantime. And swapping between PHP versions, it just becomes a real nightmare. So some ways we can actually be more strategic when it comes to our upgrades is always pick a single target, focus on that one target first. So if you want to upgrade the framework, upgrade the framework. If you want to upgrade PHP, upgrade that. But work out which steps you need to take to get to that point. Have a real actual reason for upgrading. Don't just kind of go like, oh, we want it because it's new. Again, skip whole major versions. If you have to do a big jump, that's just going to cause more problems for you. You kind of, once you are getting to that point as well, try and find problems early so that you can actually document what the issues are and work them out and be able to divide that work up. I've seen a lot of cases where people just kind of go, we'll upgrade and we'll just keep kind of hammering on without actually thinking about what was the original problem that it caused. And equally consider each kind of issue as a possible risk for something to go wrong. So actually you want to consider the fix to be a separate risk to the actual package being upgraded. This one is probably the hardest when you think about it. It's like, how do we stop people having upgrade regressions? And what I mean by that is, if you are integrating your fixes for packages you want to upgrade to, there might be situations where you fixed it and then someone's introduced new code that is then actually also that still contains them problems. So you're going to have to keep going back and making fixes. A warning for any of the stuff I'm about to talk about as stuff that's going to help you. It's not going to work very well if you don't have automated tests. It's just the reality of doing any kind of upgrade, really. Automated tests makes it a hell of a lot quicker. It's all really about continuous integration. First thing I'm going to talk about here is Composer and how we can actually use it to research our dependencies and work out what we need to fix, and how those things are interdependent. So the first command we've got is composer outdated. And from what you can kind of see on the screen here, we've got yellow, which is major, and red, which is minor versions, which doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. It should be the other way around. But sadly, the screenshot actually doesn't show the colors properly. But yeah, it would come up with these different colors here. Equally, you probably can't see it on the screen where that big black gap is between two of the packages. It's actually giving you a deprecation warning as well. So that's a way you can start to work out, okay, these are ones that I need to deal with. The next step is this very useful command called composer why not. And the idea here is you can tell it which package and the version number you want to be on, and it's going to spit out this nice list and tell you these are all the packages that won't work. So that allows you to go make a list and say, okay, well, these are all the packages we have to find upgrades for, and work out which ones are potentially will throw problems. As you can kind of see here, it's saying like I've tried to do PHP 8.3 and it's gone and given us a load of them. It tells us like, oh no, it only supports up to 8.2. Also to note, we've got this little tree option. If you did it without, you just got a little kind of list, which is not as easy to read in my opinion. The tree output's a lot more useful. The opposite we've got is composer depends, which does the same thing essentially, but in reverse. So we can ask it which package is blocking which other ones essentially. So we know that actually that package is being used by other dependencies. Sometimes you might end up in a situation you realize we're trying to upgrade something that actually isn't used anymore. Surprisingly happens more than you'd think. Next aspect of Composer is actually doing precision upgrades. I think people's first idea when it comes to Composer Update is I'll just run Composer Update and let everything happen in one go. It's really not the way to use it. Because we're updating just the lock file, we actually can be really specific and say, oh, I want this package to be updated, and then we've got these quite useful options here you can use with it. The main ones of point is the with dependencies and with all dependencies. If you run that, it will just work out which packages would also need updates, because sometimes if you try to do one package, you might end up having to list out every possible dependency that needs updating. But sometimes that actually is the right thing to do. Other times it might be overkill. There's also this quite useful minimal changes flag. So if you're using it with the with all dependencies, it's only going to bump them up as much as it needs. It won't inject like a really new version. This is an example of kind of what that would look like. There is a weird caveat of, you can kind of see the with option being used. That package is actually a subdependency, and for some reason Composer you're not allowed to specify a package version number with a subdependency unless you use with, or this is what I found anyway. A reason why you might want to actually specify directly what versions you want is, say you're doing an upgrade, a major upgrade to say a framework, it might actually be better to install the very first version of that major update rather than the latest and greatest, because it's much more documented how to get that first one working. And once you're on that, you can then kind of step through all the later versions and try and work out the bugs one at a time. I had a lot of problems with Laravel in version 10, where between the very first major version and the latest one, there was quite a few bugs that came along the way, which I had to then backwards engineer by looking at the change logs for the framework. The next aspect of Composer is how do we deal with abandoned packages? So this can be really difficult when you are stuck with something that people are no longer working on, and how do you get around that? So the trick here is what we can do is actually fork on GitHub. So even if that package is abandoned, we can make our own version of it by forking it. And then using this command here, we can set up a repository for the fork we've made on GitHub, pointing towards that. And then we can tell Composer how to actually install directly from a branch. The idea of this is then it's going to pull in that version rather than the original. And we can start then to work and upgrade that package ourselves. It's not a great environment to be in, but hopefully if that package has tests, then you'll be safe enough to start doing some work yourself and keep it maintained. There's also some versioning tricks you can do with Composer that just might make your life a little bit easier. So first one is requiring 2 versions. So instead of having to deal with like, oh, it's only locked to a particular major version, you can tell the composer.json to allow either of these, and then that way you can use Composer update to kind of swap between versions quite easily. It can make life a bit easier while you're doing upgrade work. Likewise, there's also this ability to do like alias versions. So I'm not 100% sure it works with branches. I'm pretty sure it does. You can essentially go, I want to have this branch installed, but I want to alias it to a different branch, and that way it's going to make it compatible with all your other packages, and hopefully Composer's not going to complain that, oh, these things don't work together. And along the way as well is having a few Git skills, mainly rebase and cherry pick. They're not really too advanced, but not everyone's aware of how to use them. So for instance, say this is our upgrade branch we've created, and first commit has got all our Composer changes. Then we've got things we needed to fix along the way. So if we kind of do like the idea of atomic commits and keep them nice and clean with like each different fix, what we do is firstly do a rebase, and what we can do is push the Composer updates to the top. And then when we jump to say that package fix 1, we can run all our tests and see, does that fix we've created for the package we want to update, does it work without that update? It's updated package. So we can then create a new branch and cherry pick that commit in, open a pull request, get that in as soon as possible, and then that kind of gets us ready for when we want to do that update. It's just a better way of working when it comes to continuous integration. You want to make your upgrade branches as small as possible. It's going to get them in quicker if there is any fixes required. Again, it avoids that idea of the really big branch that has loads of work to review. This is the fun part for me, which is how do we actually block future regressions? So you might have heard of PHPStan before, and you'd be using it in your projects. What you can actually do is a few extra little tricks with PHPStan using these extensions. So the first one is the deprecation rules extension. And what this will do is in your code or even the dependencies you've installed, if any methods, properties, etc. has the php.tag for deprecated, it will scan your code, it will find any references where you're using those things, and it will highlight them as an issue. If for some reason maybe the package you're using doesn't have like those deprecation tags in place, there's also this other extension you can use which does the same thing, but essentially you just have to configure what methods and etc. you don't want to be using. So how that would look is we'd simply set up first by installing it into our project. The next part would be just creating a phpstan.neon config. And as you can see there, we just got like the app and the test paths, which we're going to scan. And here I've set up a disallowed method call that is going to look on the user model for some other call. And if it finds that being used, it's just going to raise that error message of course the problem with upgrades and gives us a little tip of where to go find the resolution. So as you can see there, we run it, and this is what the output looks like. We've just got saying on the 11th line of example.php, there's a deprecated call, and we've also found a call that we marked out as forbidden. So using this within CI, that means people aren't going to introduce those problems back into a project. If these don't work, the other thing is we can actually start writing custom rules for PHPStan, which this is one I created. Does anyone want to have a small guess on what actually it does? It's a really simple idea. It's not necessarily upgrade related, but it's a pet peeve of mine. No. So how this works is it's my no acronyms rule. So what it does is it blocks you if you try to put like ones like IP address there where it's all capitals for the IP, it will now throw an error and tell you, no, please don't do that. So the next section here, we're talking about Rector. So Rector is still relatively new to the PHP community. It only got into version 1, I think around February this year. It's for automated code upgrades. So what we can do is if we set up Rector, my suggestion is to actually try it out by installing it globally rather than installing it directly into your project. If you're just doing upgrades, if you wanted to use it in your continuous integration setup, you can do that and have it doing lots of nice fixes. But for upgrading, I didn't want that mess. It's still relatively new, but setting it up for CI can be a problem at times. So try it out using a global install. And then what you can do is just dump a config into your folder. I just put it under git ignore for now, so that way it doesn't get kept. But from there, I can edit it and put in the rules I want. So in the example here, again, we're working on our app and test folder, but we then can specify our rule. So this rule here is the allow dynamic properties attribute Rector. So if you are using a PHP 8.2 version, you wouldn't have run into this, but you might have an issue at 8.2 where you can't assign values dynamically to properties anymore. So to do that, you have to go and add an attribute to all your classes. If you've got a really big project, that can take quite a lot of time. In the case of Rector, I do recommend try and use only one rule at a time in your configs. It can become a real mess to start looking at the diffs when you've got literally like a long list of this was changed because of this rule, etc. They can also interdepend on each other a little bit. Also, a thing you need to be aware of with Rector, it's only really as good as how much type coverage you have. Some rules are perfectly fine without type coverage. Other rules just won't work. So when it comes to running it, it is as simple as just running the process command, but I do recommend you try and use the dry run option. And also maybe consider trying it on one file first rather than like letting it loose to do your whole project. But as you can see here, we found one class that we've now gone and stuck the attribute on. So that's could save us a lot of time. We can also use it for a lot more complicated aspects. Something we should also do is always make sure we run tests after using Rector, because I can guarantee you, as good as the people are writing the rules for Rector, it doesn't necessarily mean that they knew all the different contexts of how that rule could affect code. And often they can end up breaking things or just yeah, making a bit of a mess. That's another reason to do dry run. Also, once you have actually run Rector on your files, it doesn't notice white space, so it can also make a mess of that. It's best to have a linting tool like PHP CSS fixer in place, so that way it will clean up afterwards. When it comes to available rules, there's quite a lot out there when it comes to community packages. PHP unit, there's Rector Laravel, which is the one I mentioned earlier. I'm a maintainer of. There is the Cake PHP one, and we've also got some for Symfony as well. So the idea is, if you're trying to do like a major upgrade to your framework, if you go to these, you might actually find Rector rules that will save you some time by automate doing that for you. It's a great way also to get into open source work if you haven't been doing any, because learning to write a rule isn't very complicated. I'll show it in a second. And from that, you can actually, we can all benefit from the fact that like you had a problem with upgrading a part of a framework. So now you can help other people find that, detect that problem and fix it in one go. So when it comes to writing our own rules, the first thing we have to do is define a node filter. So how Rector works is you have the PHP parser library under the hood. And you can specify there what types of nodes you want to pick up. So in the case of this, we're just looking at the method call nodes. So that's when a method's actually being accessed and used. And here we're just doing a little check for what the name is. So if the name of the method call is foo, and in this other bit, we're checking if the first argument to that method is a true value. Doesn't necessarily have to be a literal true. It could be actually a variable that has true in it. PHPStan can kind of work those things out. It will then do a replacement of the actual method here, and instead we're going to use the method bar, and we're going to drop any of those arguments. So that's the kind of power we have with actually making Rector rules. If you see it returning null, that basically is just a case of trying to say like we haven't found a good match for what we want, so we're not going to do a replacement. There's also this idea of configurable rules. So most of these exist in the PHP Rector repository, and they cover a load of common scenarios. So for instance, this one here, we've got a configured rule for function call to static call Rector, and underneath we've got a configuration option of if we find use of the function call to string starts with, we want to replace it with a static call to string starts with. So we can write quite a few of those in if we just have like really common scenarios. If you want to find more of those rules and see what's available, there's a web page called getrector.com. Find rule, and yeah, you can just kind of type in there what you're looking for. Okay, last chapter now. Just how to kind of prepare your CI and production setup. So obviously for packages, when you're installing them, that shouldn't affect your infrastructure in any way. But if you are changing PHP, you're going to have to actually go through maybe some extra steps. So for example, we have matrix-based testing, where our continuous integration setup will have to effectively, we'll have both versions running. The idea of that is, for instance, at the moment we're running PHP 8.1, but we're about to switch over to 8.2. So in the meantime, while we're making all those fixes, we've got it all ready for PHP 8.2, but rather than jumping straight into it, we're actually running tests against both while people are still developing features, so we get an idea of if some problem's going to pop up. Yeah, helps us detect all those new things. If you are going to do this step, you're also best to have PHPStan run under both versions well, because you might have an instance where someone has started adding deprecations that would only be found under PHP 8.2 and not under 8.1. GitHub Actions support matrices really easily, so that's probably a great place to start if you're using GitHub, or GitHub Actions at least. When it comes to your production environment, there's also a kind of strategy of, if you can, have both versions on one server. So don't instantly think like, oh, I can install PHP, etc. version, do it as an upgrade, and then pull it back. It's best if you can find some mechanism to have both installed at the same time. And that way, if you start to see problems early, jump back and then try again, rather than risking it all on just doing that one swap over. Better yet, if you have an application that's running behind load balancers, instead have both versions running and send traffic to both versions. It should be the same code running on your server ultimately, so you don't expect any difference in performance or any issues like that. So you should be able to then kind of swap out gradually, and then once you are very confident, ditch the old version and move on. Phew. Hopefully that's been kind of enlightening. I just have like one last slide. I'll cover just how do we actually stay out of hell from that position where we've hopefully got ourselves out of it. These first four things really are the important ones, which is make sure you've tried to build it into a kind of weekly task, run Composer outdated, have a look, keep an eye on what actually is going to be a problem in the future. Have maybe, if you can, like an upgrades champion, someone who is going to be in charge of doing that and writing up all the tasks, saying like, I tried to upgrade X package, it didn't work. These were the errors that came out of our automated tests. And this one is a bit of a controversial tip. It's something I use, and we tried it a little bit at Amicus, but effectively, Dependabot is a piece of functionality from GitHub. You might have seen it if you've got a security issue in any of your packages. It will open up a PR and say, you need to change this package, it's got an issue. But you can actually add a Dependabot config to your project. And from there, you can specify which packages you want to look at, or you can just say, look at all of them. And you can even start to schedule when it makes those PRs, tagging them, all that kind of nice stuff. And what it will do is then start creating PRs for you, which automatically have just that package updated if possible. It's really useful. When it comes to my side projects, I'm very lazy, so what I do is I always dump in a config that just says upgrade everything, and I'll also add an extra action step that says if it's Dependabot and the PR passes all the tests, just merge it in anyway. But a lot of people think that's crazy talk. So yeah, I'll leave it on that note. Thank you for listening. If you do want to interact with me online, X is usually the best place to dump me a message. So yeah, thank you everyone.
Thanks, Peter. That's it's really packed with great tips. I love it. Does anybody have a question? And if you are watching this online, you can also ask questions using the chat box. I do have a question, if nobody has a question. So it's all obvious to me as a developer why we need to do all of that stuff. But when you try to, how do you make the case for this to business people essentially, because it always comes down to how do you justify the time spent to do all of that stuff. So how do you present it to business people to make them understand why this is all necessary?
That is a really tough question. Amicus, it's a bit easier because for us, security is really high on our list. So for us, we want to have security updates in the event that some flaw does get found and we need to make a move like that day to get it upgraded. The last thing we want to have to do is report back and say, oh, we now need to move to a whole major version first, and we don't even know how long that will take. So that side's quite easy. Obviously, not every company necessarily has that as a priority. I think the next one is kind of just at some point when you get too far behind, it's going to be very difficult and it will start costing extra money in different ways. You might have to find developers who have got a more niche kind of mindset to be able to work on those older systems. You know, if we think about front end code, like how often does a new framework come out and therefore people don't necessarily want to work on the older stuff as well. So those are the main arguments, I think. Also, as I said in the talk, just, there'll be new functionality that you might not be able to do, and you'll have to try and work out a way and say like, well, this is going to cost us because actually the thing you want isn't anywhere near as easy now. We have to spend time.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So yeah, like security and avoid future costs basically would be like two good ways to present it, I guess. Anybody has a question over there?
Hello. I recently upgraded an app, Symfony app, from version 3 to 5. Within those versions, the default project structure changed quite a lot. I was wondering if you had any recommendations about whether it's worth changing your project structure to sort of the baseline that the package recommends or the framework.
I'll be honest, I've not really seen this too much, although Laravel has just done something similar where like between version 10 and 11, there's now been a change. But I think the understanding of that is you don't need to do it necessarily. And I would say it's probably best actually to stick with what you've got. It's probably not going to have much of an advantage. Like it might confuse some new people when they come into the project, but maybe they're just not used to the way you've styled it. But that's kind of common across all projects in some way or another. The best thing really is to get into documentation of that and say like this was a decision, even having a decision log necessarily to say on this date we decide as a group that it didn't make sense to do this one and we might come back to it, but now we're sticking with this, and documenting like what that means compared to maybe what the default is. I don't think there is much of a silver bullet necessarily to fix that one.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, onboarding new people was the main thing that I thought of, but that log is a good idea. Try that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think those are called ADRs, aren't they? Architectural Decision Record or something like that?
Yeah, I'm sure they're definitely some fancy name.
Yeah,
there always is. Don't like acronyms, as you saw in the talk.
Sure. I think if you look that up, like you might find some techniques and stuff to do it. Yeah, for sure. Question over there.
Do you think, like, as a kind of culturally, like in the developer culture, we're also kind of culpable for these sorts of situations because we're not perhaps making the case strongly enough or teaching juniors when they come in how important it is to have a good routine of like a maintenance regimen where you're upgrading every month and allowing kind of pressures from elsewhere in businesses to kind of being pressured to kind of say, well, it's okay, you can put that off, it doesn't matter. You know, rather than saying, well, actually, this has to be done. Because it's like going, well, you don't have to go to the dentist and you don't go for 20 years, you know, but it's going to be a real problem when you do. And so maybe we need to be more culturally, we need to pass that kind of knowledge down and be more, and fight for it more. Sorry, rambled on. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I think I know where you're coming from. I definitely think there is a responsibility for developers sometimes to, I think sometimes there's like that apathy sets in with developers as well, where they go, we won't get the time to do this, so we won't do it.
Exactly. But it's like, you can't do that. You're a grown up. You've got to, you've got to deal with it. And that's part of the gig. And I think that's, again, where we may be culpable as a community for not making that such an important part of what we do.
Well, I think, and I kind of alluded to it in the talk, maybe I didn't get it through strong enough. It really is about doing things in small pieces and documenting how to maybe do things in small pieces as well. Because I think there's always this mindset of, the only upgrade you'll do is, oh, this major upgrade needs to be done, but we're not looking at, well, actually, could we just tweak this one package? Like, even if it's a sub-dependency, get it updated. And as I say, work with continuous integration. Don't consider it as like, this is a task that has to be in a massive branch. Yeah, you might not be able to upgrade to the very latest right now. But if you are behind, the best mindset is to still go, well, I can still work out how to get bump it up a few more versions, and try and make an effort. One of the things how I actually started with Rector was I would just find one rule that I thought, that's quite a cool rule. I'll run it and I'll then create a PR and put that up. And that way I've kind of had to pester other people at work to go, oh, I've made this little thing. It's really easy to review because it's the same change, just in multiple files. They'll look through it and they'll go, oh, that actually is neater. You've taken away like a good few lines of code here. There's no reason to not merge this in. It's obvious that it's not going to cause problems. And that, I think, kind of builds confidence over time. Just make those little changes, yeah, rather than, let's say, if you're writing up the tasks, if there's a moment where like a junior's got some time because it's between projects or whatever, if you've written up that task to say, well, we know upgrading this package screwed up this test, can you go back, re-verify it? And if it is still a problem, can you still try and upgrade it and fix that? Get the fix in, doesn't even need to update the package, just try and get the fix in. Yeah, hopefully I didn't ramble too much either.
So there's one question online. I'm going to be honest, I don't understand the question, but maybe you're smarter than me. So I'm going to read it out, and if you understand it, fine, and if not, we're going to go to the next one. So the question is, does open source prefer two long-lived branches relatable by Rector definitions, or is there any plane equipping a fork or a plugin architecture with some sort of feature flags versus mutate and extract in a matrix?
I'm not sure I follow.
That's a lot of words, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, I think we're just going to move on to the next one and leave an opportunity to the person who has the question to specify, maybe.
Hiya, really great talk, thank you. So during your talk, you mentioned that tests are vital to be able to do this. Unfortunately, in one of my projects, it's a legacy project and it doesn't have great test coverage, and it's behind on the PHP version and Laravel version and a lot of packages by quite a few versions. What do you recommend we do? We're kind of stuck really where we don't have the confidence to upgrade it because we don't have the automated tests. What do you have any smart ideas about what we can do there?
I can definitely say, I probably should have mentioned it in my talk, the PHPStan stuff, that can work without any automated tests. That's just adding an extra tool. Hopefully you've got continuous integration at least if there are tests.
Yeah.
Coverage is always a difficult thing. It again depends on applications. Maybe there's like trying to find some low risks, or if you can just get some extra smoke tests in that like cover the very obvious things. Mm-hmm. You can use Rector to do some work for you still if you know there's particular things, but you're obviously going to have to spend a lot more time, again, like QAing necessarily to make sure that works. Yeah, I'm trying to think really. There isn't a great deal much beyond that. It's everyone has this problem, really, isn't it, with that legacy as such project where writing tests, just you need that time. Again, it's just trying to be strategic about that and where do you put your tests that's going to have the best impact.
Nice, yeah. But I mean, Rector and smoke tests, they sound like a great starting point. So yeah, thank you.
Great.
Speaking about Rector, actually, if we want to learn more about it, what's the best way? Is it like the Get Rector website, or is there any other resources? Or?
The Get Rector website's not too bad. There is actually a dedicated book that was written for it. Going through it, I didn't find it necessarily great, as I'm someone who likes to learn by example.
Right.
I will say one of the cheeky things of how I got started writing rules myself was ChatGPT. So it's actually very easy to just give it a dot block. Sorry, not dot block. You know what I mean? A kind of markdown block of saying like, I want this code and I want to change it into this code. Can you write me a Rector rule? Right. And actually, a lot of the time, it got you a very good start, at least, to then start playing around. It's one of those things I keep thinking I need to write some resources myself and get more into it. But yeah, at the moment, it's still a bit kind of fledgling. Yes.
I feel like Ask ChatGPT is the new Ask Google.
Definitely.
You mentioned that dependable. Does that actually count against your GitHub Actions minutes, or is that available?
As far as I know, it's available all use. I'll admit I have paid accounts, and maybe there's some aspects I've not run into. Obviously, once it triggers actions, I'm assuming those actions it's triggered will count against your like minutes, isn't it? I think of GitHub Actions. So, not too sure, to be honest.
Yes, want to check, I guess. Any other questions over there?
Yeah, I'm asking as a layman, but you talked about redundant dependency at some point. So what strategy would be used to eliminate those redundant dependency without altering the development process? You know, you could be new to a job and everyone is guessing, is this working? Is this a redundant dependencies? And you don't want to disrupt the whole system in that place.
Again, it's kind of one of those things, like obviously you have to be quite confident in automated tests. There is a tool, I didn't mention it in the talk, it's just started to add too much, but obviously I mentioned Composer Depends, and you can specify the package. There is actually a tool, I think relatively new, and that will scan your code base as well, and it will actually see if any of the dependencies you've got if the code actually isn't being used in your project. So if there isn't any direct references, it would then highlight that and say we couldn't find anything. So that also might be an automated tool you could use to give you an indication, is it going to cause problems or not?
Yeah, nice one. Maybe one last, because I think I'm cautious of time, and the game is happening in half an hour. So no, nobody. All right, let's get another round of applause for Peter. That was really good, mate. Thank you very much.
Thank you again.
I don't think I've got much more to tell you because Charlie covered it all at the beginning. So yeah, I'm just gonna thank you all for coming, and I'm gonna thank the sponsors again, Runway East and Silicon Brighton. And yeah, I'm gonna let you all enjoy the game. But if you want to stick around for a bit longer, you're allowed to as well. Cheers, everyone, and see you next time. Take care.